Hello, my name is Eli Yanga. I'm CPHR. I'm also a new immigrant who came from the Philippines last June 2020 at the height of the pandemic. Right now, I am change advisor for the British Columbia Liquor Distribution Branch, and I work with my colleagues to bring about positive change in our organization. So one very curious conversation I had with my colleagues is the unique cultural characteristics of Filipinos. And it's a conversation that we're continuing because they seem to have noticed that we possess like a distinct cultural traits, and I did my best to research for my boss and give them these traits. So the primary one is the concept that we're calling di ibang tao, which literally translates to not other people. So they're considered to be one at heart. We're together. We're part of the same community. And that's where a lot of Filipino values revolve around. So the other offshoot value that stems from this concept of di ibang tao is pakikisama, which translates to togetherness. So for a Filipino, there's this concept of being one with others. You are building this community. You empathize with one another and you do your best to lift each other up. And it's this concept that allows us to really provide sincere and genuine service with others and make them feel very welcome. It's that pakikisama. And then further to that is another value that we hold. It's called bayanihan, literally championing one another. And it's this value where every Filipino helps one another. We pitch in, we give a little bit of ourselves, we give our all to make sure that everyone shines. And when they need help, we reach out. We embody this concept of helping one another and then making sure that everyone's all right. We check on each other. So yeah, all these values come together for this, for us to have this cultural background where we really are embodying unity, collaboration, and then equity for all those that we interact with. How unique Tagalog or Filipino is as a language. It's very syllabic. Some of my friends are even telling me, or some of my Spanish friends and my friends from Latin America are telling me it sounds Spanish, but they don't understand what we're saying. And that's for good reason. The Philippines has been under 300 years of Spanish rule. And although we've adapted English towards the latter half of the century, we've always been a Hispanic nation and a lot of Spanish influence is present. So one of those things that I discussed with my boss was this syllabic conversation between a passenger in an elevator and the elevator operator. So the way it goes is the elevator or the passenger, when the elevator opened, asked the elevator operator, ba 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 ba. And the elevator operator said, ba ba ba. And then the person who was watching them, he's an American, he was like, did you two just have a comprehensible conversation? And it's so funny because it does make sense, and any Filipinos listening in would know exactly what that means. For reference, ba 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 is a question that basically asks, is this elevator going down? Granted that it's a bit informal, there are some contractions involved, but it's that changes in pitch and in intonation that makes it very clear. And ba 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 is basically, yes, we're going down. And it's just basically the elevator operator confirming that it is indeed going down. It's a very interesting conversation. It's a complete sentence. And yeah, that's one feature that when my boss heard, he was in utter disbelief. He even had to Google it. And it turns out it was correct all along. Started at first He was initially, it was banter in the hallway. He was like, can you help teach me some Filipino words in my office? And I'm like, oh, for sure. And then we went to his office, and before we know it, we were spending like half an hour talking about, trivia about the Philippines, where he needs to go, if he's going to come and visit. And then we went about talking about these random words. And it was very interesting. And then we even went into this conversation of the Filipino traits that really jive well with Canadian society. So we were talking about how come when a Filipino comes in, they blend in immediately. And I had to show him this chart on cultural nuances that basically shows how Filipino collectiveness really aligns with that Canadian concept of community building and helping one another. So he was like, no wonder it's very easy for Filipinos to really assimilate. And that conversation went on for several one-on-ones where he was very curious, and he always keeps asking about learning more about the culture and being more and more familiar. And like, I remember in our last one-on-one, he was like, no wonder, like, it's always about, oh, that's why when I deal with Filipinos, they're very easy to talk to, they're very responsive, they're very cordial and kind. And it just made a lot of for lack of a better term, it made a lot of things click with him when it comes to relating with people from our cultural background and heritage. Just him being very mindful, very careful, very culturally appropriate when he approaches it. Like, he starts really in this very cordial and curious way. And like the way he tries and pronounces, he's very sensitive. He's like, am I pronouncing that right? Am I using this correctly? It's never used in a inappropriate or ridiculing manner. And it was really just great fun. And like, I remember he started one meeting with everyone in our department, and he's like, magandang umaga. And everyone was like, what was that? And he was like, that's actually Filipino for good morning. And it encouraged this healthy discussion among our peers. And they're like, okay, maybe next week we'll introduce one more Filipino word. And that's where it went. Like, once a month he'd introduce a new word he'd Google. And it was so funny. And like, the Filipino staff and even the rest are just having a good, it was great fun and great joy being that, discussing that and bringing it to the table, and being able to spread awareness about our language and by extension, our culture.